A heavy canvas backpack sat in the street dust, holding 500,000 Mexican pesos. On September 19, 2024, military forces and National Guard units conducted a targeted operation in the Santa Fe neighborhood of Culiacan. Armed agents encircled the property to detain the target and his associates. Reaching into his bag, the target extracted tightly banded stacks of currency. He extended the cash toward the uniforms, banking on the historical reliability of regional corruption. Assuming greed would overrule duty, he waited for a nod. But the soldiers kept their rifle optics locked on his chest. And that's when he realized his elaborate network of protection had just failed. It was over. I'm about to break down how a single piece of digital audio dismantled the most secretive enforcer in modern organized crime. For a long time, government investigators chased a phantom who didn't exist. Early newspaper reports and law enforcement leaks mistakenly identified the surrounded man as Mario Alexander Gamez Cuevas. Rival intelligence files listed him under a different alias altogether, Fernando Perez Medina. Both profiles proved completely fabricated. His verified legal identity remained Martin Zazueta Perez, though the streets referred to him strictly by his operational title, El Piyi. Operating as the Supreme Security Commander for Los Chapitos, he managed the aggressive faction inherited by the sons of a notorious boss. Zazueta Perez commanded fear precisely because nobody knew his face. He enforced underworld law from behind a thick, dark mask. If learning the hidden mechanics behind these headlines resonates with you, subscribe to this channel. You'll discover how criminal empires fall. The path to this command opened abruptly during the winter of the previous year. On November 22, 2023, armed units apprehended Nestor Isidro Perez Salas, a brutal enforcer widely feared under the nickname El Nini. Treating his position like a celebrity tour, the former head of security lived for the camera. He purchased exotic tigers. Custom European fashion filled his closets. Routine videos showed him firing automatic weapons into the air for internet audiences. That insatiable need for attention provided authorities with everything they needed to track his movements. Once the state removed him from the chessboard, the syndicate's leadership required a radically different type of protector. To fill the void, they promoted Zazueta Perez. Viewing his predecessor's vanity as a terminal disease, the new commander instituted strict operational discipline. Silence became his weapon. Operating in the shadows required more than just hiding his face. The new chief engineered a sophisticated communication matrix designed to defeat modern surveillance. Instead of carrying a personal cell phone, he relied on a localized mesh network of encrypted radios. Couriers delivered handwritten orders on dissolving paper to coordinate troop movements across the state. Whenever he needed to travel, decoy convoys departed from 3 separate safe houses simultaneously. This strategy forced overhead drones to guess which armored truck carried the actual target. Zazueta Perez also compartmentalized his personal security detail. Only a handful of inner-circle bodyguards knew the exact location of his primary residence. Lower-ranking gunmen received their patrol routes through anonymous dispatchers, ensuring they could never betray a location they didn't know. He transformed paranoia into corporate policy. This structure insulated him from the daily chaos of the streets. The system worked perfectly. Maintaining this defensive perimeter depended on an army of invisible watchmen. Across Culiacan, thousands of young scouts, known locally as halcones, monitored every major intersection and highway overpass. These lookouts operated in carefully scheduled 12-hour shifts. Earning meager weekly wages, they recorded license plates, tracked police cruisers, and reported unusual aircraft activity. Zazueta Perez structured this early warning system like a grid. If a state police convoy crossed into the northern sector, dispatchers instantly routed cartel transports southward. The watchmen sat outside corner stores, sipping sodas and typing on cheap burner phones. They blended smoothly into the urban background. To the untrained eye, they were just teenagers wasting time. But to the security commander, they functioned as a human radar system. The network seemed impenetrable. Then the ground beneath his feet began to fracture. Late summer of 2024 brought a violent internal rupture that tore the Sinaloa organization apart. A vicious turf war erupted between the loyalists of Los Chapitos and seasoned veterans serving a rival faction. The crossfire consumed the city. Within 10 days, forensic teams recorded 48 casualties across the region. This steep body count included combatants, but it also swallowed ordinary citizens driving home from work. Families found themselves trapped inside their houses. Convoys of tactical trucks exchanged heavy machine gun fire at rural intersections in broad daylight. One local shop owner, mourning a relative caught in the violence, told regional reporters they were living inside a cemetery without walls. Stray bullets shattered the windows of elementary schools, leaving terrified children huddling under their desks while the violence raged outside. Nobody was safe. The bodies left on the asphalt forced the government to escalate their timeline. Administrators could no longer tolerate the daily reports of violence broadcasting across national television. They needed a high-value capture to justify their security policies, and the result was a broad shift in tactical operations. Alongside targeting high-ranking leadership, intelligence units intensified their pressure on the support networks surrounding them. Authorities understood that a commander never moves alone. The army began quietly arresting those young street scouts off the corners of Culiacan. Inside interrogation rooms, captured watchmen traded pieces of the puzzle for lighter sentences. While they couldn't provide a name, they pointed to specific safe houses and patrol routes. Analysts fed this raw data into complex mapping software, cross-referencing anonymous tips with satellite imagery to build a detailed view of his territory. The net began to tighten. By mid-September, those interrogated lookouts successfully isolated a specific geographic grid. Intelligence pointed directly to the Santa Fe sector, a residential maze where the commander reportedly managed his defense operations. Zazueta Perez believed the dense civilian presence in this neighborhood would deter a strike. Assuming officials would avoid deploying heavy artillery near schools and local markets, he felt secure. That assumption proved disastrous. Defense planners mapped the exact coordinates of his primary residence. They utilized surveillance drones flying at altitudes too high to be spotted by street-level halcones. Tactical organizers coordinated a joint strike force combining elements of the National Guard and regular infantry. Synchronizing their watches, the squads prepared to move. The objective was overwhelming force. Escape was impossible. The ground operation initiated with sudden, mechanical precision. Armored troop transports rolled through the early morning shadows, crushing the illusion of safety the enforcer had built. Convoys moved simultaneously from 3 different directions. They cut off the main arterial roads leading out of Santa Fe. Above the convoy, the rotors of a helicopter chopped through the humid air. The aircraft provided real-time visual tracking of any escaping vehicles. If the detailed breakdown of this operation is hitting different, take a second to hit like. It genuinely helps the algorithm show this reporting to more people who need to see the truth behind the headlines. Dismounting swiftly, soldiers established a secure perimeter around a seemingly ordinary concrete structure. Armed operators stacked against the exterior walls, waiting for the breach command. The target was trapped. Inside the residence, the situation deteriorated fast. LP stood alongside 6 of his armed associates. Every man in the room carried high-caliber assault rifles, possessing enough ammunition to sustain a prolonged firefight. But the tactical disadvantage outside left them no options. Troops had locked down every sight line. Choosing to pull the trigger meant guaranteeing their own deaths. The cartel enforcers lowered their weapons. Without a single shot echoing through the neighborhood, the army breached the doors and secured the perimeter. The silent surrender shattered the myth of the untouchable warrior. Zazueta Perez walked out of the house. He faced the armed soldiers waiting in the courtyard. Stripped of his protective barriers, he stood exposed. The Phantom was finally flesh and blood. The captured commander refused to accept his new reality. As soldiers moved to apply the steel restraints, he attempted to use his remaining authority. Looking at the commanding officer, he stated firmly in English, "I am the boss of the security forces." He expected the troops to pause, to recognize his status, to negotiate terms. He waited for the familiar hesitation that usually accompanied his presence. Instead, the infantrymen ignored his declarations. They kicked his legs apart and ratcheted the handcuffs tightly around his wrists. That era of talking your way out of a raid had expired. Law enforcement needed a high-profile prisoner far more than they needed a localized compromise on a dusty street corner. Searching the property, investigators began cataloging the reality of his operations. The mythical glamour faded quickly. Physical evidence recovered from the scene painted a grim picture of criminal administration. Forensic accountants later logged 573,000 pesos found inside a heavy canvas bag. The money didn't sit piled haphazardly. It was meticulously organized into discrete bundles wrapped in rubber bands. Investigators discovered pieces of paper attached to the stacks, bearing handwritten accounting notes. One bundle read, "PA expenses," indicating his personal operational budget. Another stack bore the label "patrol expenses," designated for fueling and supplying his network of armed trucks. This mundane bookkeeping stripped away the cinematic aura of the narco lifestyle. He operated as a middle manager, carrying his expense reports in a dirty bag while fleeing from a helicopter. Agents also documented 3,000 fentanyl pills inside the residence. The evidence was undeniable. Tactical extraction proceeded fast to prevent any rescue attempts by loyalist factions. On September 21st, 2024, authorities transported the captured commander to prison. His destination was the Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1, a fortress universally known as the Altiplano Prison. Located in Almoloya de Juarez, this facility held a dark history for his organization. It was the same maximum security complex that his former boss had famously escaped from years prior. But the political climate had shifted severely since those days. Prison wardens instituted extreme isolation protocols. The new inmate couldn't communicate with the outside world or coordinate any subterranean engineering projects. Concrete walls severed his connection to the dispatchers. The network was decapitated. Confinement in Altiplano rarely signifies the end of the line for high-ranking operators. The United States government began applying immense diplomatic pressure on the Mexican administration. Washington demanded custody, viewing Zazueta Perez as a key node in the global fentanyl supply chain. Historically, extradition treaties stalled for years inside the judicial system, bogged down by endless appeals. This time, the timeline accelerated. The violence ravaging Culiacan had exhausted the patience of politicians on both sides of the border. Stripping the syndicate of its tactical commanders became a shared international priority. Legal maneuverings that normally took a decade were compressed into 11 months of swift bureaucratic action. Prosecutors drafted indictments in secret. They sealed the paperwork to prevent defense attorneys from discovering the cooperating witnesses. The trap was set. But a large question still lingered in the public consciousness. How did intelligence agencies finally connect the Phantom's alias to a verifiable legal identity? The breakthrough didn't come from an intercepted radio transmission or an informant. It came from a recording studio. On March 22, 2024, a prominent international music star released a track titled La People 2. The record explicitly name-dropped Piyi and his close associate, Jorge Humberto Figueroa. These lyrics dragged the secretive enforcer out of the shadows. Millions of listeners suddenly recognized his operational alias on the global charts. He allowed his ego to be flattered by the tribute, failing to recognize the target it painted on his back. The song brought his operational name to public light. The ghost had a name. Years of legal pressure and intelligence gathering materialized on a secured airport runway. On August 12, 2025, the government executed one of the largest simultaneous extraditions in modern history. Guards marched Zazueta Perez onto the tarmac alongside 25 other high-profile fugitives. The sheer scale of the prisoner transfer signaled a heavy blow to the syndicates. This elusive figure who spent years carefully avoiding cameras now stood exposed in the harsh daylight, shackles dug into his wrists and ankles. As he boarded the aircraft, the contrast was stark. He boarded a one-way flight out of the country he once terrorized. He was stripped of his weapons, his aliases, and his protective barriers. The engines whined as the cabin doors locked. Sinaloa was gone. American justice hit him the following morning. On August 13, 2025, United States Marshals presented him in the Brooklyn Federal Court. Standing inside the Eastern District of New York, he faced a judge under his true legal identity. The prosecution unsealed a devastating list of charges. Federal indictments included narco-terrorism, weapons offenses, and the distribution of vast quantities of synthetic opioids. There were no officials to compromise in this courtroom. Those military lookouts and armored patrols he previously commanded couldn't reach him inside the granite walls of the federal building. Prosecutors treated him clinically. They reduced his violent history to a series of exhibit numbers and sworn affidavits. Processed not as a famous phantom, he was just another defendant facing a life sentence. The illusion was gone. The anomaly of his story lies in the irony of his exposure. A man who sacrificed his identity to survive the underworld ultimately lost his freedom through targeted military and intelligence operations. Tactics could protect his face from surveillance drones, but they couldn't protect his ego from the allure of fame. Today, he waits inside a concrete cell. He traded the sun-drenched violence of Culiacan for the sterile, fluorescent isolation of an American maximum security facility. All that carefully bundled cash meant nothing. Years of silence meant nothing. Justice eventually swallows everyone who tries to outrun it. They leave behind only the wreckage of the communities they destroyed, collateral damage in a war for power. He built a fortress out of shadows, only to watch it crumble the moment someone turned on the lights. If any of this stuck with you, like and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover.